Greetings, friends. Greetings, y'all. Welcome to StarryTelling Hour. It is 11:11 a.m. Pacific time on Wednesday, Miércoles, Mercury's Day. And so here we are. I'm really happy to say that I will be joined in just a little bit by Alyssa Luna of In the Moon Den. But I wanted to speak a little bit first about In the Sun's Den. And the heliacal setting of Jupiter, which, depending on where you live, may have already happened or is happening soon. So you're looking at a frame right now from my camera, shot from our house here in Richmond, California. That's the amazing Mount Tamalpais that you see here on your screen. And just above, maybe you can see the belt stars of Orion. See them here? 1, 2, 3. And I know they'll be dim. And especially if you're watching this on Instagram, where you're going to get like a little tiny frame. So if you'd like, you could pop over to my YouTube page through the link in my bio if you're watching this on Instagram. So what I'm going to do is just move through time here a little bit. And we're going to watch the sky move. And I'm going to try to narrate what I'm doing with the lasers. So this is after sunset, right? And here I'm pointing to Orion's belt. And that's Betelgeuse and Bellatrix, the shoulders of Orion. So the sun has set. The sun's sinking down into the 6th house. And we're looking at Orion, who in many myths chases the Pleiades through the sky. I'm trying to show the Pleiades there. Now I'm pointing to Aldebaran, the eye of the bull. The 7 sisters, the Pleiades, they sit on the bull's back. Let me pause this. And so I always love to see, first of all, I think there's many more beautiful stories of Orion and the Pleiades than some hunter chasing the little girls around. Or, I mean, there's so many different stories from New Zealand, from here in the land we now call America, and all over the place. That of Australia, of like Orion chasing the Pleiades. It's typically not the prettiest picture. But when I do envision it in that way, I like to see the horns of the bull kind of protecting them from Orion. And the truth is, why is Orion chasing the Pleiades? Because Orion follows the Pleiades through the sky, like no matter where you live, right? And so we mythologize this. Okay, but I want to show you here, like where the laser's pointing now, kind of at the bottom of the frame. That's Jupiter. And look at how low on the horizon Jupiter is. This video, I think it was maybe April 28th, something like that, a few days ago. Happy May Day, by the way. Happy Beltane. So this is this time of the year where the Pleiades disappear. And I'm going to speak more about that. But it's this time of the year, this year, also when Jupiter's disappearing. It's going under the beams of the sun. So I'm pointing at Jupiter there. And you can see how Jupiter's like in the orange stuff, right? These are the sun's beams that follow the sun after sun sets or rise before sun does to announce the coming of the light, right? And there's this term in ancient astrology that says under the sun's beams. Well, let me see. Yeah, this will move forward another 30 seconds. So I want to let it go because I'm pointing to the Pleiades who are here. I'm going to see if they just show up a little bit more. Because if even 30 seconds makes a difference after the sun has set. And I can tell you, this was 9 p.m. or just before 9 p.m. here in Richmond, California on April 28th, 2024, because I've been creating a series of backyard astronomy videos each 10 days as the sun is moving through the phases or the decans, the 10-degree divisions of the zodiac. And so this is the sun at like 9.5 tropical Taurus, just about to jump into the second phase. So yeah, it's really hard to see the Pleiades, even in this video that I'm looking at. I could maybe open another one later, but I don't think that's necessary. Let me just tell you how this goes, right? So here are the Pleiades, who in our day and age so beautifully mark a gateway of tropical signs. They reside at the cusp of tropical Taurus and Gemini. In fact, my favorite of the Pleiadian stars is the star called Maia, who is the mother of Mercury, the mother of Hermes. Um, and Maia just last year in 2023, I believe in June, processed from Taurus, where that star has lived for 2100 years, into Gemini. Alcyone is kind of the brightest stars of the Pleiades, the one that's often identified as like the Bohemian star or magical star of that cluster, moved into Gemini some years before. And now most of the Pleiades cluster stars are in tropical Gemini, in the very first arc minutes of tropical Gemini, and some are still in the last degrees of tropical Taurus. So it's really amazing to have in our day and age some markers of sign cusps in the sky. Regulus is another great example. Regulus, the heart of the lion, has recently processed into tropical Virgo. That happened in very late 2011 or early 2012, depending on your math. And Regulus is very close to the ecliptic plane, very close to the path of the sun. And so to have a star that is bright, beaming, is like ancient tradition, so close to the path of the sun, to the ecliptic, to the zodiac, and also at a cusp of signs, it's a really amazing thing to have. So we have other stars like Zubin el-Janubi, which typically we draw these days as the fulcrum of the scales, though it means the southern claw, because there was a time when the scorpion was shown holding the scales. But there was a time when the scales themselves were just the claws of the scorpion. So the stars Zubin el-Shamali and Zubin el-Janubi of the scales constellation, they mean the northern and southern claws, respectively. And that southern claw, Zubin el-Janubi, which definitely competes for the coolest star name of all time, it resides very close to the ecliptic plane. And in our day and age, it's at 15 Scorpio, right? It's at that cross quarter point, halfway between 0 Libra and 0 Capricorn. And, you know, 'tis the season to talk cross quarters anyway, on the opposite side of the scene. So I think we'll do some of that now, because here on Beltane, like which is often celebrated on May 1st, the sun is near that cross quarter point between 0 Aries and 0 Cancer, between equinox and solstice, right? And there is a Winter, I see you. Um, there is a there is a kind of strange thing of why celebrate some of these, you know, kind of cross-quarter calendar days like Samhain, for example, on November 1st, on All Saints Day, instead of on like November 7th, when the sun is actually at 15 Scorpio, halfway between the equinox and the solstice. And there's some calendar corruption stuff going on here. And I'll be excited to speak about our guest with our guest Alyssa Luna about this, because I know that she aligns to the signs and the seasons and these quarters and cross quarters as well. All right, so let me say this thing. Like if you go back to like Hesiod's working days, for example, and I wish I had the exact quote to read for you, but he speaks about planting at the time when the Pleiades set. Now, look, the Pleiades, they're like near the path of the sun. This is true for all the ecliptic stars. They rise and they reach and they rest and they root every day as the earth spins, the sky spins, right? But what he's speaking about when he's saying the Pleiades setting is this time of the year when the Pleiades who have been here are now being taken under the beams of the sun. Let's say the sun's in Aries, okay, and the Pleiades are at the cusp of Gemini. They're like sextile away. They're like that, right? And so the sun sets, and you're like Pleiades, and then it gets darker, and you're like, oh, Pleiades, right? But then, like the next day, the sun is a little closer, and the next week, and the next week, and the next month, right? And suddenly the sun gets so close to the Pleiades that when the sun sets, now we can't see the Pleiades anymore because it's just too bright in the dusk light, right, to see that cluster of stars. That's called the Pleiades going under the beams, right? Well, then the sun will pass them by, will conjoin them. And literally in our day and age, that's the sun ingressing Gemini. That means the sun is conjunct the Pleiades. It's an amazing thing. But the sun's going to have to pass them by. 15 degrees is the old rule, right, for the beams of the sun. You can just take the sun in the chart and draw 15 degrees to either side. Like there's the beams of the sun. 15 degrees preceding the sun at sunrise, 15 degrees following the sun at sunset, right? And so maybe when the sun's at 15 Gemini, then the Pleiades will be reborn as morning stars, correct? Because now the sun has passed them by, and so they're rising before the sun. And frankly, that happens as soon as the sun's in Gemini. The sun's past the Pleiades, but they're rising together, right? So we don't see them. So the sun has to distance day by day about 1 degree per day. Maybe 15 days later, maybe a little bit longer now, we first see the Pleiades as morning stars. Many cultures actually set their calendars to this. A new moon on the Pleiades back in the day in the Babylonian tradition was like the truest new moon possible. They called the Pleiades Mul Mul. It's like the stars, basically. In Hawaii, they start their, well, it's a moon calendar, as it was in Babylon as well. But they calibrate that moon calendar in Babylon to, back in the day, actually, to the Taurus new moon and to the Pleiadian new moon specifically. And in Hawaii, they time their moon calendar also to a solar event, which is called the Acroniko rising of the Pleiades, which is as the sun sets, you see the Pleiades in the east. And that happens actually in November on the other side of the year. Okay. So what does this have to do with Mercury? Well, let me say a thing real quick. It's said that one of these Pleiadian stars, Maia, wasn't really digging the whole daughter of Atlas heavenly fame scene. And she chose rather to live a humble life here in a cave on Mount Kalini. And so what is this, like Maia going into the cave? And I would suggest this is the annual disappearance of the Pleiades. And that cave is literally the beams of the sun. Especially because if you know the story of Mercury's birth, he comes out of that cave and he steals his brother Apollo's cow. Well, who is Apollo? It's the sun, right? Well, Mercury had a dad too, and that's Jupiter. And so Jupiter goes under the beams of the sun every 399 days. The Jupiter sun cycle, or the sun Jupiter synodic cycle, on average is 399 days long. And during those 399 days, Jupiter spends about 1/10 of that time in the cave or under the beams of the sun. 40 days and 40 nights. Where have you heard that before? Well, we often kind of invoke the retrograde period of Venus's 19.5-month dance, which is about 40 days and 40 nights. It's typically more like 42. But it's true also for Jupiter. Like Jupiter is just about to disappear. Let me show you this image again. Well, you're gonna have to push the right button, dude. This. Okay, so like I'm circling Jupiter here. You can barely see him because he's in that orange stuff, right? Let me rewind time just a little bit. Well, so here's me like lasering Jupiter, right? So every day the sun is getting closer and closer to Jupiter. I mean, Jupiter is not a fixed star. Jupiter is a planet, which means moving star, right? Jupiter's slowly moving against the backdrop of the constellations, but the sun moves much faster. And so the beams move much faster, and Jupiter's being taken under the beams, right? And then it's not just 30 degrees of the sun's travel because Jupiter's moving too. And so on average, it's 40 days and 40 nights during the Jupiter disappearance. Now, the myth goes that Jupiter saw Maia in her cave, and he visited her there. And Mercury was born of this visitation, right? So Mercury's not playing his part mythically currently. And I want to go and find like the next time this can happen. But Jupiter is. Because Jupiter goes under the beams of the sun again every 399 days, but he does this with the Pleiades only once every 12 years. And that's happening now. Like Jupiter is coming to align to the Pleiades as they're both going under the beams of the sun, which, in my point of view, is in the sun's den, in the sun's cave, right? And the story goes, then Mercury is born. Now, this would be Mercury passing the sun by and popping out as an evening star, right? Mercury then, well, he alleviates a tortoise of its shell so he can have a drum, and he's drumming around, and he hears this beautiful flute. And the flute is being played by this herdsman who is actually Apollo, who had been serving a penance for a year here on Earth as a humble herdsman. And Apollo's just into his jam, he's just like deep into the flute. He doesn't even know that he's actually playing to this turtle drum that's happening, being played literally by a 1-day-old baby. This is the first day of Hermes' life. And Apollo comes out of his trance and he opens his eyes and the cows are gone, because Hermes had stolen the cows from this flute playing herdsman. And he walked them in one direction, and then he saw that they were leaving hoof prints, and he's like, oh man, like that won't do at all. Like, this guy's just going to follow these tracks. And so what he did then is he walked the cows backwards in their own prints, and he walked backwards in his. And then he covered the hooves in his feet with bark, and they walked off in a different direction back to Maia's cave. So Apollo followed these tracks and found that they ended nowhere. And it was a great mystery. But, this is Apollo, and he's the god of divination and truth. And he cast lots, which told him exactly where to go. And when he showed there, he saw that there were 2 pelts of his herd hanging on this cave wall. And he knew he was in trouble, because this means that he would probably have to have months added to his penance here as an earthling. He busts into the cave, and what he finds is a bunch of wood nymphs who are there caring for this 1-day-old baby. And he runs straight to the baby. He's like, what'd you do to my cows? And the wood nymphs are like, what? You're crazy, dude. Like, it's a 1-day-old baby. He can't even speak. He's like, he stole my cows. And Hermes can't help it. He starts laughing. So, the jig is up. And as Apollo kind of grabs Hermes to talk to him, this instrument falls through the air, and it's accidentally kind of struck by Apollo's fingers as it's falling down. And it's the lyre. It didn't have a name yet, right? But Hermes had taken guts from this cow and strung 3 strings, and some say 7, across that tortoise shell, and created harmony. And so Apollo is also, a guide of music, like plays this chord. And it was just like, what? Right? And so all of his fury is gone. He's like, what is this thing? And Hermes like, what are you? It's like a turtle shell, man. Oh, he's like, oh, with some cow gut strings. He's like, so that's what you did with the cow. He's like, well, and he picks it up and he plays his chord. And then he plucks a few, and he's like, oh my God, it's like, you made this with it, like, fine. He's like, but why did you need 2 cows for 3 strings? He's like, oh, I only needed 1 cow. But he's like, I thought I should sacrifice the other one to the gods, because maybe some of them would be angered that I killed the cow for this purpose. And he's like, what do you mean sacrifice? So this is this next thing that Hermes invented on this first day of his life. I didn't tell you about his first invention, by the way, which is the whole padding the crib thing to make it look like the baby's still in there when you sneak out the cave to go steal the cows and that kind of trip, right? So anyway, he's like, sacrifice? What do you mean? He's like, well, I cut the meat and I gave a piece for each of the gods. He's like, I gave you one, and this means that he knew who Apollo was, or at least does now. So Hermes can see through disguises, you see. And Apollo's like, oh, okay. He's like, yeah, I cut 12 pieces. He's like, what do you mean 12? There's 11 of us. He's like, oh, well, I ate mine, and that was it. So Apollo's like, no, dude. Like, stealing is one thing, lying about it's another. Like, blasphemy won't do. And so I'm going to take you up to see my dad. And he takes him up to see Zeus, right? Who is Jupiter, right? And he's like, hey, this kid stole my cows, and he cut them up, and I don't know why. He didn't want to tell him about this beautiful instrument that was created. And then he lied about it, and then he called himself a god. And Zeus is like, is this true, son? And Apollo's like, yeah, I just told you. He's like, no, is this true, son? And that's when Apollo realized that this was another one of Jupiter or Zeus's children, right? Mercury or Hermes. I stopped there because I realized I kind of missed a crucial part of the story. So we're going to retrograde back. There's a part in the cave when he's like, well, what is this thing? And he's like, I don't know. It's like strings on a tortoise shell. He's like, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. He's like, it needs a name and I would do anything for it. He's like, well, what do you want to trade? And Apollo says, well, what do I have to give? And Hermes says, well, how did you find your way to me? He's like, cast lots. So what is that? He's like, oh, it's just a way where you can divine truth. There's many techniques, like, astrology. It's like, what's that? He's like, look, I'll give you that. I'll give you divination if you trade this beautiful instrument to me. And Hermes said, cool. Right. Okay. So we needed that piece because now here in Olympus, right in front of Zeus says, is this true? Did you call yourself a god? He said, yeah. He's like, I mean, I'm your son. And look, I'm like way better with animals than this guy. He's sleeping on the job. So I could do that for you, boss. He's like, look, I'm good with commerce. This guy gave me divination for a tortoise shell with cow guts on it. He's like, like I could do that for you, Dad. He's like, and I'm fast, man. He's like, put me in, coach. And this is when Zeus says, all right, I think you've earned your wings, but you have to promise me that you'll never lie like this again. And he goes, well, I can't tell the whole truth. And Zeus just says, I would never ask you to, right? And that's how Hermes got his wings. Now, I usually like to tell that story in much greater depth, but let me just tell you right now, like, it's an astronomical story. Maia, Mercury's mother, going into the cave, that is the sun coming to take the Pleiades under the beams. Then every 12 years when that's happening, Jupiter comes in. He's actually already an evening star. It's just like right now. And I really can't encourage you enough to go outside after sunset tonight and wait and find Jupiter and look up and to the right if you're in the northern hemisphere, up and to the left if you're in the southern hemisphere, and see the Pleiades there, see them together. And then watch over the next days. You won't see them anymore because the sun is taking them into the cave, right? So here's Jupiter and Maia in the cave. Now, in other times, and it's quite rare, Mercury will also then come out of the beams of the sun as an evening star, and then he'll go retrograde in the constellation of the Bull. And this is walking the cows backwards in their own footprints, right? And then what happens is Mercury then reappears as a morning star with Jupiter. And that's Apollo, the sun, right, rising, taking Mercury up to have counsel with Jupiter. And this is when Mercury gets his wings. So thanks for hearing that story with me. I'm Sadhu Jen. I'm seeing that you have Moon in Kritika, which is the Pleiades and the Nakshatras from that particular lunar mansion tradition. Linda says, crack the code. Yeah, that's what we're here for, right? I'm seeing a bunch of words about an interesting name. Gosh, glad to know I wasn't totally off with the Zubin enunciation. Yeah, look, when I say Zubin el Janubi, I'm not sure that's how that's pronounced. I could spend some time with some teachers who can help me pronounce Arabic words because that's what we have for most of the stars. But this star that I'm about to bring on the screen right now, whose name I can pronounce. This is Alyssa Luna, friends. Alyssa, surprise! You're live. Good to see you. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for sharing the stories.
It's what I do. Yeah, and we had planned to have you on here a while ago, and then I was like, well, I got to tell people about Jupiter, and I might as well like say a little bit more. I was like, well, how does this relate to Alyssa? And I think there's many ways that it does. But one is Alyssa, this is Alyssa Luna, friend, is an amazing being, as you will soon find if you don't know already. Her world, one of her worlds, is in the moon's den. So I was like, right, this is in the sun's den. For just in the story, they call it Maya's cave. So this works for us. Um, yeah. Hi. How are you, sister?
I'm good. I am in the moon den, literally, right now. It's always interesting to me when I kind of reiterate that for people. It is as much a physical space. It really is, my sacred space. And, creating is kind of my way of just, sharing that space with others and being a part of their sacred space. So there's a lot of just kind of like giving and receiving happening within the space. So it's as much a physical place as it is a digital realm on the interwebs.
Yeah, I think that is so important. Staying human in these evolving times and this dawning of the age of Aquarius, which on one level is so cool. But if we just go there without taking our humanity with us, I don't know that we'll be around for the turning of the next age, right? So, how do we stay human? How do we stay grounded? And one of the ways that I like to assist in this with astrologers, because we're practicing a craft that can become so intellectual and so mental, is reminding people of like, oh, these charts are actually maps of the sky. They're decent ones, but it's a much better map like right outside there on the big screen, right? And that's, Alyssa, how you and I met, like over astronomy for astrologers. And one of your many great arts is embodiment, right? And bringing astrology more into the body. And I was feeling that too. Like, this is interesting. It's like Jupiter's now in Taurus and has been in Taurus. I mean, Jupiter was once known as the year king. It spends about a year in each sign. It doesn't work just like that, which, sometimes I rebel against some of the simplicity of how Jupiter's timings are taught. But regardless, right, Jupiter spends about a year in a sign. And so this is like Jupiter here towards the end of Taurus, but Jupiter will disappear under the beams of sun in Taurus. And then when Jupiter reappears, he'll be in Gemini. And it's actually pretty common. It's the norm, actually, for these outer planets, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, beyond, to have their transition against the cusp of signs under the beams of the sun. And just being under the beams in general, there's something of like a great reset that happens there. You're either moving from evening star to morning star, as it is with the fixed stars or with the exterior planets. For Mercury and Venus, as you well know, Alyssa, like they can also do this backwards amazingly, right? And for the moon, always the other way. She disappears as Hecate's bow, the thin crescent balsamic moon of the sunrise east, and then reappears as Diana's bow, the young moon in the sunset west, right? But there's something very transformative there, and there's something hidden. And yeah, one question it's just all inspired me to ask you is, how does astrology hide in our bodies?
In every way possible, really. And I think there's a lot of ways to contemplate that, because we can do, the kind of circular thing and move through the story of the zodiac piece by piece and build upon from that. Or we can go in just, in the present moment without any context and feel something in regards to one archetype, at a time even, but it's really the full spectrum kind of always happening all at once. And we've talked about that. I'm a big stickler for, you're not a Libra, you're all things, in conversations like that. So I think that we can really feel, in our bodies, all of the lessons and stories and symbols, and it might not necessarily be quote unquote physical. But in one way or another, we can really get into our personal experience, as a spirit, as a spiritual being. And I think people are a little resistant at times to kind of acknowledging that. Like they hear, oh, spirit, spiritual. I'm not, of that kind of dogmatic or religious perspective. But it's much simpler than that. It's simply, the you within the you kind of is how I see it. And I think that thinking on our astrological practice really can inspire us and support us in deeper understanding of ourself, whether that be how my body moves, you know, through space, how I experience things, how I receive and transmit. And there's just I could I could ramble on that for hours. Um,
I love hearing you ramble on that, and I could certainly listen for hours and hours. And yeah, I've kind of recently invited you, maybe challenged, I don't know, but you to do monthly AstroEmbodiment transmissions at the School of Earthstrology at our new constellations realm. And there's been one so far, which I've done a few times, and it's epic, which is the Aries AstroEmbodiment class you recorded, which I wasn't able to take live because I was in Hawaii with the fam. But it's cool. It's just like I wish I had the time. I need to make the time. It's like I should just do this every day. And then things are going to change soon because on May 5th, on Cinco de Mayo, we're going to do our next transmission for constellations. I'm going to put a link here in case y'all want to check out what constellations is and are. But basically, it's a membership group that we have at the School of Earthstrology now, where there's like many different circles. So like I'm teaching a monthly class. This Sunday, I'm teaching a class that I'm really excited about. It's called Activations and Activators. And the idea is like if you were born, well, let me just say, like if Uranus is transiting your moon, for example, you're being activated by Uranus, and something's going to happen that is Uranian to your moon realms. And we wish you luck with this. But if you were born with the moon conjunct Uranus, then you are an activator. Like you are a traveling Uranus transit. And as much as Uranus will inspire folks as planetarily comes around to inspire them to change, which is typically Uranus's MO. Like if you are Uranian, you kind of carry that same signature. And it won't always be beautifully received because Uranus is shocking and strange and these kinds of things. And usually Uranians have that kind of shocking, strange thing to them. Yeah. But anyway, that's what I'll be talking about: Uranus and Neptune and Pluto and Chiron some, and what it is to be activated by them, and what it is to be an activator according to their way. And what we'll do is, because we'll have a huge community of folks there, is I'm just going to ask people like, who do you feel is a Neptunian activator? Which is a really weird word for Neptune, you know. But when I asked this the other day in the bathtub, which is the right place to ask a Neptune question, it came in for me, Jonesy from Sigur Rós, who, you know, that band and his voice, they just send me to Neptune like instantly. And turns out he has Neptune Venus. And it's like, I see, right? So we played this a little bit in one of our community discussion groups at Constellations last week. We were talking about Uranus and somebody mentioned Robin Williams, and there it is, like all over his chart. So I'm excited to share that. That's going to happen this Sunday, May 5th, and I'll do my thing at 9 a.m. Pacific, or probably 9:15 after Alyssa. So Alyssa's going to start us off with a hour-long or more or less Taurus AstroEmbodiment practice. And then we'll do our thing and then have a community discussions group. So again, I stuck a link here in the chat if folks want to check out constellations. It's just geminibrett.com/constellations. We'll bring you right there. We're currently at this like maiden voyage price of $16 a month. So if you want to pop in and check out the class and hang out for a month and see what it's about, do it. We're going to start adding different circles. Like we've already got this AstroEmbodiment circle going. There will soon be an Astro Tarot circle and AstroHerbalism circle. Like a bunch of different things are coming in soon. Stephanie, I see Bjork. Was that your response to Neptunian with Bjork? Bjork does Uranian for me, and also Neptune and Pluto. I have Bjork's chart. I'll look real quick. So as I'm digging into that, Alyssa, it's tricky to go like in zodiacal order, right? Like we see these great ways to kind of like develop according to zodiac story, like, but you're also going through polarities, right? Like as you move from Aries to Taurus, like they're not opposite in the zodiac, but archetypal, you can't find signs that are really more opposite. So what do you find in the challenge of kind of shifting gears from teaching the embodiment of Aries energy to that of Taurus energy?
I feel like another thing I'm a little bit of a stickler for is that, no one thing ever exists in isolation. So I can't necessarily move into Aries embodiment without at least, reflecting on Libra, energy. We kind of need both, and we're given that reminder of both, right? Every full moon of a solar season. So it's really nice to just kind of feel the full spectrum and not necessarily think about what one particular thing is unique in, but rather like this greater goal that both sides of the coin share to create like one major like core essence. And then we kind of come back out a bit and zoom out and then focus back in on, okay, now we're at the Taurus step of the thing. But I really love Taurus for embodiment in general. I did this thing where I took the 8 limbs of yoga. This is the traditional Raha Yoga, 8-limbed yogic path. Maybe people are familiar with that.
Would you maybe say what the 8 limbs are for those of us who aren't?
So the 8 limbs are the yamas and niyamas. These are our basically personal observances and kind of the structure of things that we follow to move through our experiences with more mindfulness, I'd say is a good word. Things like santosha, contentment, and Ishvari Pranadhanha, which is, there's these things that pull us back into our day-to-day experience. They're basically like guides. And I have it on the wall here. I printed out. What I did was associated each one with a planet. So our baseline is yamas, and I relate that to Saturn. That's like the structure within which we move about our day. And then Jupiter holds our niyamas. These are our personal observances, and we move up from there to pranayama. I have as breath work, and that relates to the sun or our spirit. I really feel a connection there. The third is asana, which is our movement and physical practice, which I relate to Venus. I think that through Venus's eyes, we begin to feel our body and move within our body. We go a bit higher. We move to pratyahara, which is kind of like I don't want to use the word controlling. That sounds a little intense, but we can say controlling the senses. And this to me is a very Mars thing to be doing. And my relationship with Mars is unique in many ways. I was very like discouraged early on in my astrological journey. You go on Google and you type Mars energy or Mars symbolism, and the first thing that's going to come up is something relating to like, sex, war, violence. And we know Mars to be much more complex than that. So I think when we start thinking about how we manage sensory, delight and desire, we do see Mars there. So having that really mindful willpower is a Mars thing, and that is pratyahara, how we manage those impulses. And then dharana is concentration, our mercurial kind of matter in a lot of ways. So this is where we begin to find our meditation practice and sit more with what's happening on an intellectual level. And we get deeper into the realms of Dharana. From Dharana, we go to Dhyana. Dhyana is our lunar focus. So that is all about our deeper meditation. So not necessarily reflecting on the day-to-day, but really sitting in meditation, and kind of evokes that yogi on the mountaintop kind of thing, kind of experience. And that's really a lunar thing to me. I feel like once we begin to connect with our intuition, right? Some of us are pretty adept with those correlations and correspondences. And then there is Samadhi, which is the last. So there are 8, but there's 7 traditional planets. But Samadhi is kind of the all-encompassing, the entire solar system, the entire universe. And, we only really reach that place of oneness, I think, when we're able to really meet all parts of ourselves and, the planetary essences that inherently reside within each of us, all of us, even if it's kind of on a subconscious level. It's happening whether you're aware of it or not. We have different moods of being, different ways we approach different circumstances and situations. And I'm obviously a really big advocate for, embodied practices that bring us into that space where we're not just thinking about it, but we're really feeling it firsthand, with all our senses, intact. And I like correlating things like that. Like, I might say, yoga is yoga and that's its own thing. We can look at the Vedas and the Vedic texts, and it's something to be done with a lot of reverence and gratitude. And um, I see that as a very important, it stands alone. We don't need to necessarily say, I don't need to go down this route. But I just believe that I like to see the threads in common. I'm all about kind of pulling from different pieces and seeing what connects just for a deeper experience. I'm kind of always on this ongoing search for meaning, and I try to offer that through, what I create and share. So this is just another way for me to, find some patterns, draw some connections, and perhaps have a more colorful experience. So, just a long winded way to say that there's a lot of wonderful ways to see things mirrored in different philosophies and cosmologies. And I think it's just amazing that we're able to even do that,
Yeah, we're living, first of all, beautiful. Thank you so much. I'm excited to listen back to that many times. And there's some wonderful comments here of folks who agree with me. Yeah, it's amazing that we're living at this time where we can access information from like so many worlds, right? Throughout time, space, like old scriptures from the Vedas to some of this Hellenistic stuff that's coming back online. Um, and what do we do to kind of try to merge these things? And for me, I feel like I feel rootless in many ways. A couple of weeks ago, my friend Dave Hoover was on here. We were really just talking about connecting to our ancestry and our ancestors, and I'm doing some of that work, but I'm also kind of like, I don't really know, and so it's like falling into many different traditions and then trying to like assemble them and integrate them. Like, how do you learn like a 4-element system, but also a 5-element system if you're studying Qigong or Feng Shui or something, and then try to find a way to merge them. And the trick, it's like all of these things kind of seem to contradict until they don't. And then they all land, as you were sharing, it's like, oh, wow, cool. Like, I'm not sure that that's where I would go first with planetary associations, but it's because like I haven't been in that practice and this all makes sense. I really loved hearing you connect sun to the breath, for example. And what came in for me as you were sharing that, and it was, I was just on my own trip in this space for a little bit. It's like, oh, it's like the breath of the year, like as the seasons change, and it's like the spring and summer is like inhale, and right, the fall and the winter is like the exhale or something like that. I really feel that during the day, right? Like sunrise and reach, and then rest and root. You get this kind of inhale and exhale. Like some have said that one of the reasons why you sit for 4 days in a vision quest is because that gives the chance for Earth to take 4 breaths, or for the trees to breathe 4 times.
Mm.
Right. And then you're now linked, right? Now you're in the same dream, which is a really beautiful thing to envision. And we know, that this daily happening of rise and reach and rest and root is also linked to energetically to the annual happening, right? Of like spring and summer and fall and winter. So yeah, I hadn't even thought about it that we were coming on Beltane here on May 1st. And God, I don't think there's anybody I would rather have on with me to talk about these things, because I know you've been celebrating like the turning of the year for many moons and many suns, right? How long has that been part of your walk?
Yeah, I remember it like it was yesterday. It's so funny how that works. I think it was about 2005 or 2006. I went to my first full moon ceremony at Cosm in Manhattan. And I've been kind of within that community since then, going on, I guess it'll be 20 years next year.
Is Cosm, sorry to interrupt you, is that Alex Gray's
Mm-hmm.
space? Is it Alex and Allison Gray?
Yeah,
Cool.
so they've moved now. They're currently up in Wappingers Falls, New York. So that's just near Poughkeepsie area. So we get to go up there, which is, I'm really grateful to, I've had that continued connection. And it is crazy to think that it's been that long. And I think that, even before that time, I'd been kind of attuned to nature. I have my parents to thank for that. It's a funny little family joke. When I was born, my dad called me Moonbeam, and it's funny because he's a fisherman, so he knows. He'll text me like waxing gibbous, and we get to like go back and forth with that. And I try to like show them when we're together at night, like, oh, like check out Antares and like see the constellation, and they're interested. I'm glad that they are who they are. I'm really grateful for that. And I think I made that joke with you earlier. It's a very Cancerian thing, I think, to really have that, want that meaning within family, and that's an interesting thing for a lot of us, I think, to really sit with and contemplate, because and of course we just came out of these Aries Libra eclipses, thinking about ourselves and our relationships. So that's a big part of what the moon den is. A lot of the things I create are inspired by my personal experiences, and that's experiences of my own, experiences from childhood with family. So there's a lot that kind of just comes together in that way. So yeah.
And you're Cancer rising and moon in the 4th, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we would hope to have that really speak. And moon square Neptune. Yeah, so let me circle back to that. But speaking of the circle of the year, so did you begin practicing with cross quarters like Samhain on November 1st, or where are you at with it now? Like,
When
is
I when I
go
started, it was very much like I was just going on YouTube, following what people had to say, and it was generally on more of the pagan roots of the traditions and that kind of thing. And then once I began really taking more time to really feel into the moment, not just within the earth experience, but also the sky experience, I do try to just honor the sun moving past those 15-degree points, those actual midpoints of the signs. And it's for me, that feels really nice. I kind of just keep like extend the celebration. I'll kind of work with that pivotal moment just through like a 2 week span. It's nothing's like one and done. Even when we're working with like full moon, new moon, it's not like do things within this hour, otherwise nothing matters, kind of that kind of mentality. So I just keep things going. I'll start to contemplate around, the more traditional calendar based day, and then just follow where the sun is moving, what's happening on that day, where sun is at 15 degrees,
Hmm.
and, make sure that I'm like seeing that happen, noting that point in space. Um,
Yeah, so pagan roots are older than May, which by the way is named for Maya. But right, like there wasn't May, and then when the whole Gregorian thing happened, they just moved. Like not everyone did it at once, but like basically they skipped from October 4th to October 14th. Right, like I think it was today was Monday, October 4th, and then tomorrow was Tuesday, October 14th, so that they could realign basically the Easter with equinox. because we didn't have the length of the year right, and so things had started slipping, right? So I mean, the idea of the sun at the cross quarter between equinox and solstice, like that's an experiential thing, kind of. So they're always tricky for me, right? Because I'm so one of the things that I'm doing in the school right now is I'm doing this astronomical Decan walk, where I'm like working with the stars every 10 days as the sun moves through the phases, right? And there's many ways to do that. Like one of them, I'm just going outside with the camera and like, hey, this is what the zodiac looks like at this time of the year. Like check out which way the Dipper is facing, right, at night. And like, let's look at the morning, check out the Big Dipper. Like a month later, oh, do you see how that moves, right? It's fun. Like I'm experiencing like a lot of the things like I know to be true, but I'm actually just like on this schedule experiencing. It's like wonderful, right? But so one of the things I'm doing, I'm very blessed here. I don't have dark skies. I live in the Bay Area. There's tons of light pollution, but I can see sunset every day of the year, clouds allowing. And I'm just watching. I've for years now watched the sun just move on the western horizon from the Tropic of Cancer to the Tropic of Capricorn. And, like the due west is right in between those solstice extremes, where I'll see the sun stop southing, for example. There's a hill over here I call Solstice Hill because it's where the Capricorn, the solstice sun sets. There's a tree that like the most south sun illuminates. I call the birthing tree, right? Because then the sun's reborn. And then over here, at Cancer solstice time, at North solstice time, the sun sets in between these two, like I call them the eucalyptus goalposts, right? And then right in between those two extremes is west, right? Is the equinox. But the cross quarters aren't halfway in between the equinoxes and solstices.
Mm-hmm.
The thing's doing like this, and it has to stop and turn around, and so it's hitting the brakes. Like it's really fun. Like Aries time, it's moving crazy fast day by day. Like from 0 Aries to 30 Aries or 0 Taurus, it's taken up like a lot of the zone. And
Mm-hmm.
then it kind of shows you that kind of fastness of Aries, and then like the quote unquote stubbornness of Taurus. That's not how I teach Taurus, but like Taurus then hits the brakes. It like really slows down. Like you wouldn't expect that of Gemini, but Gemini covers like this much area.
Mm.
The sun is just stopping for solstice, and then Cancer covers that same area, but on the way south, right? So yeah, I've been like trying to riddle like, well, how would we, besides like counting the days or keeping the moon, right? Like, how would we actually know when the cross quarter occurs? And I think it's that challenge for myself, like trying to awaken some of the kind of the archaic practices, like that helps me understand what you just said, right? Like, be careful with like magical precision. Like, I appreciate the idea of, in the hour of the moon on the moon's day, right? Like, capturing the silver light of the moon, right? Like, and all that. But on another level, like, we're talking about transformations, we're talking about shifts. And to kind of retrograde back to where we began, this idea of like Jupiter disappearing and then reappearing, or Venus right now is under the beams. And so, modern astrology, it doesn't really pay attention much. I didn't learn about any of this stuff. It's like, kind of many traditions now start with Pluto, who
Mm-hmm.
you'll never see with your eyeballs, right?
Yeah. And I feel like I don't want to say that we're kind of, we've gone, I don't want to say that we've gone too far. I think there's a time and a place for everything. But the thing that I just keep repeating like a broken record, and, what do we say? Redundancy is built into every good space mission. I really want us to keep what is sacred simple, and keep what is simple sacred, and
Mm.
just know that, the experience for what it is without knowing all the intricacies can be just as profound, and that is something that I think we just forget. And no one, we're all so well intentioned. We want to really understand and make sense of everything, and know as much as we possibly can. And we're all sponges for knowledge and information and experience, but we don't need to go that far sometimes. I don't need to have my west facing bomos with 8 lit candles in every corner, to really invoke something transformational for myself. I can simply sit on the grass and look up, and that can be just as, of a catalyst, I guess, you know, as anything else could be. And they're gonna, but that's not to say that don't do that. Like, I'm still gonna do that. I'm still gonna have moments here and there where, you know, the cards are out and all the candles are lit, and I am orienting myself to a direction and, you know, reciting something. Um, but you know, take it or leave it. And again, that's not to say, you know, don't cherry pick. I feel like there's so much nuance, and I'm like the nuance police all the time. Because, you know, I know and I get it. We can't just, you know, we don't want to just cherry pick. It's not just take what, you know, serves and leave the rest. You know, we don't want to go that route. But I had a reading with, do you remember Mark Elmy? You spoke with him a
Yeah,
while.
yeah. Mark's great. Y'all should check out Mark. He's a really wonderful transmitter of some of the Mesoamerican
Oh, he's
calendrics.
wonderful. I had a Mayan astrology reading with him, and he said to me, he's like, you might be someone who, you know, people might look at you and say, oh, what is she doing? She was into Buddhism, and now she's into this, and now she's doing that, and what's that about? And it might not make sense. But for me, that's kind of always been my truth, is just really trying to see, like, all right, well, what feels meaningful and what can we work with? And that's not to, you know, appropriate the thing in any way or just pull what I want from it. It's to really, like, with so much reverence, say, wow, that works, and that connects me to something greater than myself. And when we can share that with others, that's like, that's the whole point. Like, that's, you know, that's kind of like, if I had to really summarize like what I'm trying to do in this lifetime, it's just to share inspiration and support. If I had to really narrow it down, you know, what will, and inspiration can go one way or another. It might be good inspiration, it might be inspiration to make you question something and, you know, have something change in your life. It might be just the inspiration to think differently. Um, and then that support, you know, what's comforting, what creates joy, what can be helpful, you know. And I'm not someone to ever say you need this thing, otherwise, you know, nothing's going to work out for you. Like, I'd never call a candle um an abundance candle, or a, you know, candle for peace. Like, I can't say that. That's for you to make that choice if you choose to or not. I'm just here to create the thing because I needed it, and maybe you need it as well. So that's kind of my whole basis, really.
Yeah, beautiful. And speaking of candles, and I want to say this before the hour because we'll get kicked off of Instagram at least. Um, Check out Alyssa's amazing sites, inthemoonden.com. I'll put it in the comments here. So inthemoonden.com. Alyssa makes amazing candles and alchemy candles and planetary candles, amongst other things that you can find there. So do. We can keep it going beyond the hour if you'd like. The YouTube zone. We'll just get kicked off of that one place where the screen is so small. Anyway, so folks, if you want to stay with us, if you're watching currently on Instagram, head to my bio and you can click right to a links page that will take you to the YouTube space where you can see this live stream. I kind of want to catch up with some of the amazing chat that's been happening. there's been so much of it. I just want to say that it really warms my heart to feel y'all participating. There was some comments about Bjork's chart, which maybe I'll actually get into, in Kanye West's chart, which is interesting. Alyssa, another Alyssa Francis wrote, oh, unfamiliar with that activator thing. Yeah, I made it up, but I think it's real. So she says she has Mars conjunct Pluto, Mercury conjunct Uranus, and Venus conjunct Neptune. Right. So like the 8 candles, Alyssa, that you're speaking of, I mean, I imagine it's right, like equinox, cross quarter, solstice, cross quarter, equinox, whatever, we can name those. But there's also, like, you know, I'm tripping on like the 8 candles of the menorah, for example, right? And how you're lighting 7 with the 1. That's just like the sun, right? Like lighting Mercury and Venus and either Earth or the moon in the other crew, which is an interesting thing to consider. Actually, in the temple menorah, there were 7, right? So it was like the 1 and the 3 on either side. So it's like Moon, Mercury, Venus between us and the sun, and then Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn beyond. And yeah, I mean, I have such a relationship with the visible planets. My heart is a bit saddened when I can't see Venus like this. like I'm happy too that like for me to work the morning sky, not only do I have to wake up before sunrise, but I actually have to like drive a little ways, and it's a whole thing, right? So I love that when Venus comes back here in, I don't know, probably July, August, maybe even September for some folks, it's like she'll be right here and after the sun sets, and but when Venus is gone for a couple, 2, 3 months, it's hard for me.
It's sad.
It is. And I appreciate that, like, love deserves a break or whatever. Like, she deserves to go have her journey, do her thing, and come back. But yeah, it's tricky. And so once you establish that kind of relationship with visible planets, you really understand why the ancients spoke about like the challenges when planets were under the beams or combust. I mean, sadly, it's often communicated these days like, oh, that's bad, like that planet's weak or something. I think that that planet is in its transformation and we don't know what's going on with us. And there's something so mysterious about it. Like my first teacher, Daniel Jamario, was just like, oh, just add Scorpio. Like he's like, whatever sign they're in, just like add a bunch of Scorpio to it. But it's like all the signs. It's like that kind of Pisces expression as well. There's just something new, and there's like a death and a rebirth happening there. It's like a trial by fire. Like they're in the candle. Do you know what I mean? And so now, as I'm like sitting with Venus, and especially I think it's June 4th that Venus aligns behind the sun for Kazemi. Like I just align with the sun, and like try to like close my eyes and like see Venus or feel Venus there, and that's cool, right? But on another level, it's like when she's back and I'm just like, Venus, it's just a whole different story. And so part of like the activator activation thing is like, so Alyssa, Francis, for example, when you share that you have Mars conjunct Pluto, like if I wanted to go see that conjunction when you were born, or let me share it this way. When I was on Hawaii, I didn't even know it was the day that Mars and Saturn were conjoined, but I was like walking back very carefully on super spiky lava after a night like out just being with the stars and very dark sky space. It was brilliant. I looked back to say thank you to Haleakala, which is where I was, and Mars and Saturn were rising right next to each other. It was the day of their conjunction. I spoke about some of that last week, like my experience that day. And it was like just so amazing to behold. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm just like Saturn walking carefully on Mars spiky stuff. Like get it. And this ancient volcano is like all is right. And then but when I spoke at like an astrology panel on April 20th. Sorry, on 420, bro, when Jupiter and Uranus conjoined. And then I went out and I looked at them, and it was Jupiter and Uranus and a comet. And what I saw was Jupiter. And I think that's like, it's really important to know. First of all, it's a brilliant time. Like if you have charts and whatnot, and you're like, yo, Jupiter will show you where Uranus is right now. I think it's amazing. But another thing I would say is like the way that the invisible Uranus is going to come to our visible experience at this time is through the visible Jupiter. And there's something to that for me. So when I read about Mars conjunct Pluto, it's like, oh, part of your assignment is to bring Pluto in through your Mars, right? And then the question is, well, how is that received? How are you working with that, right? Part of your Mercury assignment is to bring Uranus in through your Mercury. I have Mercury Pluto. And sometimes I'm telling tales people don't want to hear. And I'm trying to learn to bring some Saturn and some boundaries to that. So like Bjork's chart came in before Bjork was born. It's interesting because the chart that we had for her originally was a 7:30 a.m. chart. And you can read these notes at astro.com. I remember like there was a sadness when I first saw this update because there's like a fifth harmonic thing that happened in Bjork's chart, even more so at the old time, which was 7:50 a.m. But at astro.com, there's this quote. So I am from Iceland and I am a Vedic astrologer. My client Bjork is born at 8:10 a.m. Hope you will correct this. Bjork called the hospital where she was born. I asked her to do so and she gave me the correct time. So the 8:10 a.m. time, fascinatingly, it brings for Bjork, let me get the chart on the screen. It brings Neptune to the ascendant. And first of all, like nothing's more personal than the ascendant. Like, that is the earth beneath your feet. Okay, right? The ground that mom's laying on when I'm born, right? Like that it's like connecting Neptune and Earth, like we can hear Bjork there. And I mean, she's born at a really strong time, the Uranus Pluto conjunctions, which were happening in the 60s and pretty close within a degree, right? There was a time in that series when Saturn came in. Chiron had already been there. There were eclipses, by the way, on the squares. And look at Sun node, so we can see that Bjork is born in eclipse season. She's born just before a solar eclipse, so that's intriguing. But what I would say is like the way that this Uranus is most likely to come through to us through Bjork is through her Mercury and through her Venus. And dig how it's like a Venus trine Uranus Pluto, while it's a Mercury square Uranus Pluto. And like Bjork's voice is uncomfortable for a lot of people, at least at first. It takes a while. You can really feel that Mercury. It's like, this shit is weird, kid, right? But then the Venus, it's like, it's beautiful. It's beautiful, right? And you kind of land into that. So anyway, I love that example came up. Somebody also spoke about Kanye West, where Jen, I think it was you that put in that quote from Kanye West here. I'm going to see that. And I want to also look to this question that you asked, Jen, about morning stars and evening stars. Who wrote the Kanye? Oh, here it is. So Jen says, that's the immortal Kanye West says. I can't even explain it. I surprise myself too. Yeah, I know what it is to be a Uranian. And so when I read that quote, Jen, I opened Kanye's chart. I don't know. Yeah, I guess I can share this. This is at astro.com. Let's put Kanye's chart on the screen. And it's nice to have some examples. Like, this is why I really love teaching in like the group setting, because we can get amazing ideas like this and examples like this. So, this is being offered as kind of a Uranian statement. Well, look at the Mars Uranus, and it's Mars Venus. Look, looks like an exact Venus Mars conjunction. Venus is at 2.9 Taurus and Mars is at 153. Amazing. And then Uranus is at 8.16. So, a question you can ask about activator activations, like check out how Neptune is opposite his Jupiter Cazimi, Jupiter under the beams of the sun in Gemini. Jupiter and Gemini in general can be kind of weird religion. Looks like we don't know birth time because they put 0 Aries here at 12 p.m. But that thing too, knowing that this is about to happen, tells me that Kanye West is in a Jupiter synodic return. and I bet you we'll see Kanye in the news pretty soon. That's always kind of these days kind of a terrifying potential of what the heck might happen when we get Kanye in the news, right? Yeah. But yeah, he's entirely a Uranian, a Neptunian, a Plutonian. You'll often find that people will have many connections to the outer planets through the inner planets, or I'll say invisible planets through the visible planets. And that's just something I've been working on for years, and I see it really speak. So I'm excited to share more about that in this jam on Sunday after Alyssa kind of drops us into the body. I'm going to take us way out into outer space, and then hopefully we'll bring it back again. I know after I teach, we'll open it up to a community discussion group, and that will always help ground the thing. Jen, you asked this question before, and I'm really so happy to see how many comments are here in the live stream, folks. It's really nice to have you participating. I wish I could keep up with them. Someday we'll just do a chat jam. So Brett, what is your take on the lore or significance of a morning star? Yeah, so let's make this Brett and Alyssa. Before the lore, let's talk about the significance. So what is your experience, Alyssa, of morning star versus evening star?
I'm an evening person, so I don't often meet the morning stars. However, I do feel that there is something very ethereal about them when they rise before the sun. It's a much different experience. And I think that some of my first real relationships with planets were built when they were evening stars. So maybe that could be why I kind of hold that a bit closer. Um, just kind of seeing sunset to reveal the planets. Like we've been watching Jupiter. I mean, we've been watching Jupiter for so long. I remember when, you know, Jupiter and Saturn were moving together through the sky, when they kind of created that almost looks like Castor and Pollux at times. And now it's just been, you know, we know, okay, sun setting, where is Jupiter, watching, you know, what in reality looks like it's getting closer to the sun, which is, like you said, you know, it's the sun getting closer to Jupiter. And I don't know, I feel that there's just something more, I don't know how to explain it. When the planet is a evening star, it's like preparatory. Like we know that we're anticipating something that's going to happen. Whereas when it's revealed again as a morning star, there's this just really fresh cosmic thing happening. And I mean, for me personally, I really like to work with solar oppositions, and I'll just dub that planet like Lord of the Night. I really like to work with planets that are rising when sun is setting and kind of having this really unique experience in guiding us through, you know, the evening. I'm a very, very evening person, even though I have a diurnal chart. So I just think like feeling into it and really seeing it helps to, you can't really decide that unless you're meeting it, in my opinion. And I've still woken up. There have been mornings where Mars has literally woken me up. I've woken up thirsty, and I'll check the chart and Mars has just crossed the ascendant. And I'm like, okay, that happened. But I feel like morning stars just offer something, you know, really rejuvenating, whereas evening stars offer something more reflective.
Yeah, and even kind of excitement and anticipation versus like hesitation, or at least like reservation. I mean, you know, the ancients literally had different names for Venus as a morning star than an evening star. I mean, modern astronomers often teach that means that they didn't know it was the same planet, which is just ridiculous. That's what happens when you sever yourself from correspondences. But the idea is like Lucifer is a different being than Vesper. Those are like Latin names for morning star Venus, which means Lucifer, the light bringer, right? And then as I teach, if you just watch morning star Venus when she's at her kind of her height, then she falls every day as she goes towards the beams of the sun for months and months. That's the falling angel, you see. And Vesper is a very different scene, you know. And Vesper typically is celebrated these days in like quiet and darkness with candles. Right? It's like a night vibe. So we lose some things in this language. But yeah, for me, I'm like you. I'm a night person. I was also born at night. I mean, I just don't sleep actually. So, you know, I'll wake up at the weirdest time. It's like, okay, a star must want to be seen. Like I'm going out. Let's see what that's about. But like I have to put the work in to see morning stars. That there's been one place in my life where I've lived, it was a little time from with my sister who lives over here, and she has like the morning side, you know. So I'd wake up and just sit out there, and it was a whole different trip. And I would begin my day with like this like planetary stimulus, right? Instead of beginning my night that way. Because I was a little more healthy with like sleep routines. I would like connect with the evening stars and then go to bed and like bring them to my dreams, and I probably sleep better. But yeah, typically these days when I get up to do morning star work, I'm also tired for most of the day. And a lot of people who are really connecting to morning stars, they are because they wake up and go drive to work or something like that, and are fortunate enough to at least be driving east or like preferably south where you can see that happening in your window or whatever. So I think that like more like the best way that we can learn to integrate the expressions of planets will be just to reflect upon what's happening in our real earthly lives, you know, through their different signatures. So I think morning star versus evening star will be different for some folks than it is for others. And also in the tradition, it's interesting, like Jupiter and Saturn were said to, you know, they're of the day sect. So they kind of, there's a dignity, it said, when Jupiter and Saturn rise before the sun. That's happening for Saturn now and will soon happen for Jupiter, where for Venus and Mars, it said that they preferred the evening side. So as evening stars, and that will be happening for Venus again in some time, right? Mars is on the morning side now. And I don't know, that's weird because on a whole nother level, you feel like Mars would have that kind of get up and go. But studying like sect and the houses of rejoicing and some of the information that comes through traditional astrology offers new riddles to tickle that I think actually has really deep insights to provide too. But if we go there, we'll be here all day long. So you're all activators. And thank you for activating this space here. Alyssa, this is certainly true of you. And I'm really grateful for you coming to spend some time. And so absolutely grateful for and honored by your choice to share some of this amazing AstroEmbodiment transmission at the School of Earthstrology this year, and we'll see where it goes from there. So friends, last time I will post a link here for constellations. Check it out. You could literally join for $16. Join us for the class this Sunday and bail. Don't do it though. We hope we will convince you otherwise. We just, by the way, if you're in constellations now, please go fill out the survey we sent you a couple of days ago. It's like literally this long, but it's really going to help us understand how much you want to participate and when you can and what kind of circles you want to be in. Like we're going to create all sorts of constellations in this place. That's the idea of it. And some of them will be for you and some of them won't be. And we want to know what interests you, what kind of things you would like to have there and that, right? We want to make that happen. Oh, Stephanie, it's awesome to see you. So yeah, come check us out, geminibrett.com/constday. Make sure you're around at 8 a.m. Pacific time. Morning star time is going to be a little easier for you, 11 a.m. on the East Coast, where we'll start with some Taurus AstroEmbodiment, take a break, and then have a little bit of activations and activators of the invisible planets transmission. And by the way, that one's going to be very chat responsive. Somebody says Bjork, we're going to the chart. We're going to see if it works or not, right? And then we'll have a good community discussion session afterwards, and we'll look at personal charts of folks in the community. And that's something we're doing throughout the weeks. Right now, we're meeting twice on Friday just to get together, hang, see how we're dealing with the heavenly happenings, and especially those here on Earth. And we're going to open up more and more community discussion times, because the main thing that's driven me to open this constellation space is to help astrologers connect and know that we're not alone in this study of the weird thing that we've been called to. And also, like, and I was really excited Friday, I led a discussion group for a little bit. Like, everybody raised their hand when I said, who's interested in doing some research together? So we want that. Nadine, are we not doing Saturdays at 10? Not this Saturday. This Saturday, I'm going to go watch the ultimate cross-quarter celebration. I'm going to go see Koa do the maple with his class.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And last year we watched him. He was in second grade, and now in third grade, like, he gets a little bit more advanced. And then we watch the older kids too. And for me, that's just like Earth's axis, and there's so much sacred astronomy in the thing. So I will be there on May 4th. May the 4th be with you. And then we'll meet at Cinco de Mayo and have a very different kind of drink than others do at that time. Yeah, Winter says research, exclamation point with her hand up. That's right. Yeah, so we're going to start that. Like, okay, if this activators thing is true, go find me 100 Uranian charts and let's see how it works, right? Like, we can advance our understanding of this craft so much more quickly if we do it together, if we honor many different points of view. So Nadine, right now there's nothing on Saturdays at 10. I might go back to first Saturdays of the month for my transmissions, probably around that time, but not this weekend. This weekend, 8 a.m. Sunday, and then 9 a.m. or 9:15 for my bed. All right. Alyssa, thank you. Do you have any last words you want to share? First words? Middle words?
Yeah, we're good. We'll share
there
along.
It is. That's it. You heard it here, friends, from Alyssa Luna. No matter how crazy the world is, we're good. Remember that, and we will see ourselves through. Thanks, Alyssa. Thanks for being here. It's nice to spend some time. I can't wait to see you on Earth again. But in the meantime, we'll do it through the space waves. Yes. Thanks again, folks, for being here, for participating. You're awesome. If you would, please give the video a like and share it around with birds of a feather. We hope to see you in the constellations space. Bye-bye.